When the government soldiers came and attacked our village, they killed many people. So I had to seek shelter in Ethiopia. There was no transport. We used to eat leaves from trees and meat that we hunted. We walked for 3 months, and for the first time in our lives, we had no bread. We slept in a forest full of mosquitoes. Most dramatically, though, local people killed some of us.
There is a war that has lasted for almost 20 years and has cost 3 million lives. It is a war of contrasts, Arab against black, Muslim against Christian, North against South. It is a war fought on many fronts, from the battlefields of the southern swamps to the Islamic re-educational schools in Khartoum. It is a war in which international interests hang in the balance, while people confront famine, slavery, and death. It is a war shrouded in a veil of silence. Sudan is the largest country in Africa, with a total population of 35 million people. Pyramids attest to a history stretching back to a time when the pharaohs made Sudan their home. It is also a Christian history, evidence of which can be traced right up to the 16th century, although Arab influence, at least in the north, has been prevalent for almost 7 centuries. Politically, Sudan, a former British colony, gained independence in 1956, only to plunge into a civil war. The Khartoum government, forced by growing radical fundamentalist movements from neighboring Islamic countries, modified the nation's laws in accordance with Islamic law and introduced the Sharia against the wishes of Africans in the south.
Sudan was not originally an Islamic country. Sudan becomes an Islamic country now because Muslims are the majority.
The North would like to have the South, but without the Southerners. And of course, cultural differences greatly differentiate the North from the South. People with Arab cultural roots consider themselves of a higher race than the Africans.
The people of the South, they don't want the northern style of life, the northern cultural identity, political identity, religious identity be flown into the South. The South would like to be free.
The war has claimed the lives of 3 million Sudanese. Almost half the population in the South is widowed. The heavy recruitment of able men has brought about an almost complete crop failure. Child labor is not only common, but essential if the remaining crops are to be harvested. There is no hope of an education, and the threat of famine is ever present.
My sister's husband was killed, and he left her with 4 children, so now I have to take care of all of them. Altogether, we are 14 people. The little money I get from part-time work is only enough for food, nothing else. Many are keen to argue that the war in Sudan is a religious conflict between the North and the South, Muslims and Christians. One could simultaneously argue both, that it is and it is not.
Sudan is thought to have oil reserves similar to those of Saudi Arabia. The fact that most of the oil lies in the middle and south of the country makes it a potential resource for both the North and South. With a civil war raging in this oil-rich area, bombing strategies are changing from ones based on religious and ethnic priorities to ones rooted in the economic cleansing of the populations.
Huge amounts of oil has been found in the Sudan. And all calculation is being made in terms of the oil. Not in terms of the dignity of the people who are there, not in terms of the future of the people who are there. I suppose because our lives do not matter.
Many nations, even the European nations, are beginning to align themselves more with the government because of the oil. And in that way, they are declaring themselves against the Southern Sudanese. And so they are going to defend the oil. They will bring arms, even in a hidden way. Because of the oil under the ground, we will destroy everybody on the surface.
Perhaps the most devastating effect of the escalating war is the overwhelming flight of refugees. In 10 years, over 5 million southern Sudanese have been internally displaced, and a further 200,000 have fled to neighboring countries. Refugees walk with only what they can carry for days to escape the ever-widening arena of war.
And if they run, where will they go? Will there be food? Will there be water? Will there be medicine for their children? They no longer have the right to any land. They don't have the right or the ownership of a house. They no longer have any belongings of their own. The fruit of their labor has been robbed from them. They have lost their crops.
Because of famine and war, almost 3 million people from the south now live in the capital. The population of Greater Khartoum, the biggest city in the country, has swelled to about 6 million people, and relief agencies estimate that over 1,000 new refugees arrive each day. The regime has divided the refugee population into 4 large camps outside the city.
Reasons of war brought me to Khartoum. My father died, so I was left alone, a young girl with younger brothers. I decided to escape with the others when our village was destroyed. We walked for a long time and our feet became swollen. We walked with sticks carrying children on our shoulders for 4 days. For us, hunger was like a disease. Our home was destroyed and burned. The rebels took our cows. We walked from a vale on foot to a place called Kir, and then we took the train to Khartoum. Now my husband is very sick.
We Dinkas are poor, but God, our Lord, always protects us. In 1986, on May 5th, I took my family into the bush, where we spent 15 days under the trees. We had to leave everything, all our clothes, shoes, everything. I had to save my family from the army. When we arrived in Khartoum, I was jobless and could only pray to God to give us our daily meal. Had the Arab soldiers not come to the south, I would not have come here. But they did, and when they came and found our farms neatly planted, they waited until the harvest and then came to attack and burn everything, just to make our lives miserable.
And so they're a mixed up group of people, of Christians and of Muslims and of people of the traditional religion. Many of them do not know even the language. It's a kind of big cultural shock for many of these people. And they don't have the resources, their own personal resources, to adapt themselves to this situation.
The Arabs refuse to welcome us here. We are suffering, our children are being killed, our elders remain in the south for they cannot move. Our cattle were confiscated and our houses burned down. Arabs dislike Southerners because we are black. We are forced to live in a place without services in the suburbs of Khartoum. God created all of us equal. If there is real justice and democracy in this country, Southerners should also have a right to govern the Sudan. They were the first to live in the Khartoum region. Even the word Sudan in Arabic means land of blacks.
The Arabs have had a tremendous program of public relations, of diplomacy, of making themselves known, even though they only make the world know one small aspect of the truth. And they have censored the exposure of the real truth to the whole world. But they have created a feeling that all is well, that there is freedom of religion in Sudan. There is no oppression, that slavery does not exist.
The apparent lack of awareness of the humanitarian plight on their doorstep seems to pervade many of the Arab communities living in Khartoum.
I really don't know a lot about war, because here in Khartoum we feel no war. So we're studying, as you can see. After we finish, we go home, play basketball, football. We just realize it on the news, that's all.
One of the greatest difficulties for the South Sudanese taking refuge in Khartoum is employment. Skin color alone prevents integration of the southern tribes into Arab culture. Refused positions of authority at any level, the southern Sudanese are left to choose menial work or begging to earn a living for their families.
The government has a policy of Islamization and Arabization. Very few Christians are government employed. Another smaller number again are people employed in the factories, but as manual laborers. The majority depend on seasonal work or daily work which they get in the market, which just enough to get them sometimes something to live on for the day.
We are unemployed, have no food, no access to medical services. The situation is terrible. We go hungry. Please, you must make our voices heard so that things change in the future.
I couldn't think of what to do to feed my children and buy clothes. I said, "My Lord, give me an idea." And so I began making crosses like this one. I gave it to people to sell at any price, and suddenly I had a job helping me to survive without begging. Sometimes I had less than 100 Sudanese dinars, but when I started making rosaries with patients, I found the means to survive. Whenever I do business in his name, I always earn something. When I go to bed in the evening, after returning from church, I think about my life and the responsibility I have. I hear a voice telling me, "Do not cry, my daughter. Tomorrow you will find a solution." Then immediately I wake up. I light a candle and start making a new design. For example, this one, which can be a souvenir. I do not have the means to open a shop, to sell what I produce, because that requires a license and money. That's why I take everything to the priest in the church, who buys it to give as gifts.
Jesus Christ.
God is great. He is my father and brother, bigger than anything. He never gets angry with me, and I never give up with my business.
With parents working long hours, it is often the children who suffer most. Unaffordable schools mean they spend their day on the streets.
The father goes early for work. The mother has to earn something, for the food. Because the whole day, the children are left by themselves practically. Those who don't go to school can be a prey to anybody. And some people are benefiting from the absence of the parents and so on to disturb these children.
Here in Khartoum, I heard that a child went missing yesterday. His mother sent him to buy something. I guess the Arabs took him and forced him to give blood. They do this quite often.
The only hope for these children is education. The present Khartoum school system favors Islamic students. University entrance exams emphasizing Islamic thought are offered only in Arabic. Invariably, the only body with the authority and means to educate the refugees remains the Catholic Church.
Of course, schools for refugees, particularly Catholic schools, receive no assistance from the state because of its intensively promoted Islamization policy and the furtherance of everything Arabic. The government does not like these schools. They are the mainstay of Southern culture, including that of African tribes, and above all, a religious mainstay. The church has organized 130 schools for refugee children. In the many camps around Khartoum, we have a total of 420,000 children from poverty-stricken families. One of the conditions that have to be met before any learning can begin is the provision of something to eat. In all the schools, apart from the exercise books, handbooks, and other materials, we also have to give our pupils breakfast, which for many is the only meal of the day.
The lack of infrastructure and funds obliges the local church to look to the universal church for financial and spiritual support. The International Catholic Charity Aid to the Church in Need is one of a few that remain helping to meet local needs.
Our coming here represents for them a messianic Eden and such a great hope that we find ourselves reeling as to whether we are able to respond adequately so that all expectations are fulfilled.
Without outside financial assistance, the school would not exist. The material situation of students is very poor. Their parents, being displaced people, have no means of contributing or helping the school.
For those in the north, faced with discrimination on a daily basis, life is nevertheless comparably better than for the refugees who chose to flee the south, condemned to suffer a hand-to-mouth existence in camps near the Kenyan border.
They shoot my husband in front of me. He dead. And I have my firstborn. That is in 1997. She dead also, my firstborn. So after there, I don't have anywhere to go. I come here because of protect my life. And if I go back to Sudan, I know I will be getting another problem, or I will be lost my life. My children, they will suffer.
When the Arabs came and burnt our houses, they killed many people, including my father-in-law and 3 of his brothers. We managed to run away with my husband. We couldn't even come back to bury the bodies. I have 7 children. They were naked when I arrived here. The UN helped them with some clothes. I was jobless, but have now been working since 1997 with the World Food Program as a food monitor in this camp. We usually go to the feeding centers and receive our daily 20-gram and 163-gram portions of grain.
20 gram a day. And the ocean dies in quite multiply. The days a gram.
Despite the conditions, people living in the camps know their good fortune. Rations are provided, schooling is available, and the local hospital works.
Hospital is to provide preventive and curative medicine for the people around, and also to help with surgical cases for those who come from the camp. We have over 90, I think, still in the wards, even though we're basically about a 63-bed hospital. We would like to expand it a bit in the future. We're trying to see if UN might help us out. We have no X-ray facilities. We also need dental. There is no dentist in all of Turkana. With the camp also, there are 70,000 people there, not a dentist.
The refugee camp schools, organized by the church, provide children with the only opportunity of receiving a basic education, and young people with professional training that greatly improves their employment prospects.
children need to go to school, because otherwise in the next 2-3 generations we shall have an illiterate generation, which will be full of problems and will cause a lot of problems to the societies.
When I arrived here, I joined a primary school. When I finished it, I enrolled on the mechanics course in 2000 in Don Bosco's VTC. I hope that when I finish my studies, I will find work as a mechanic.
The hope offered by education is often frustrated. Almost 2 generations of refugees have been imprisoned for over 18 years of war. Their vision of the world, glimpsed through books, is limited by the camp walls.
Some of the world is looking, most of the world is just ignoring them. They were able to get some small education here. 10 years later, they finished what school there is. In Kenya, they're not allowed to get a job. There's no such thing as a work permit. They are now adults. They haven't got the means to marry.
Like this?
That's beautiful. That's a good example.
The war continues unabated, and the refugees, like straw on the wind, flee from one perceived haven of safety to another until the fighting comes and they have to move once more.
Their life is so uprooted and in some way, humanly speaking, appears to be useless and without a goal. To re-establish these people to some kind of security will take, number one, time. They will have to be accompanied by people who are able to instill in them a sense of confidence. And the real rehabilitation will take place only when they can return to their place of origin, be able to take possession of their land, form once again their community, which for them is essential to the understanding of their dignity, and begin life over again. We need someone who walks with us temporarily and in a dedicated, competent way helps us to set up small health centers, simple schools, whether they are academic or for teaching trades, to set up water sanitation, to set up other emergency measures that will at least favor the survival of the people.
You see, the South Sudan, unfortunately, because it is war zone 1, has been like a cut-off thing. It is an isolated zone. And of course, foreign personnel are not allowed to go there. In fact, in 1992, all the foreign missionaries were expelled. We feel completely cut off. We feel isolated. We feel no more a people in the world. We feel no more a Christian community also among the Christian people in the world.
I think that the key word from this stay of more than 3 weeks in southern Sudan is ambassador. To become an ambassador in front of everyone and anyone we meet on our return. Ambassadors of all that we have seen, in order to demand that hearts and minds become open and willing to offer help and assistance to those who are without a voice, yet who cry their misery in silence.
Et qui crient leur misère dans le silence.